I tried aiming routines of 7 pro players for 7 days, and even if things like mimic their gameplay style and crosshair, so that I get to compare all of it, see the similarities, the differences, and figure out who has the biggest impact on my performance. I have done a lot of aim training and movement training in the past and climbed all the way up from bronze to diamond 3, but recently I have been slacking. A few X later and I'm back to gold, and I've been stuck around here for some time. So instead of just finding a single routine, I thought it'd be way better to do multiple different routines from some of the best players in all of Valorant and see how much progress I can make. We are starting things off right with TenZ, arguably the most famous Valorant player and one of the best aimers in the world. He started his pro career in CSGO, then transitioned to Valorant and started playing for Sentinels, who ended up winning the 2021 VCT Stage 2 Masters in Reykjavik. They also won the 2024 VCT Masters in Madrid, so overall a pretty impressive resume. His aim routine is pretty diverse. I started with his aimlabs playlist, which has a lot of tracking exercises. They're not really my strong suit, so it's a good thing to practice. He also has a 180 flick in there, which I had a lot of trouble with simply because of my low sensitivity. TenZ usually has a higher sense, so I had to do this exercise in like 2 motions, unless I maxed out my mouse pad, but it was a bit uncomfortable. The last few exercises were just flicking, something that he's obviously pretty known for. Now let's just dive into the game itself. After checking out his recent VODs, I could see that his crosshair is this tiny dot. I've never had a crosshair this small, but it makes sense. In the range he warms up with some hard bots, nothing too crazy. I also saw him play some team deathmatches most of the time, so I joined him in that, and I was feeling pretty sharp. This tiny crosshair made me feel very accurate and precise, and having gone through his aimlabs playlist before made shooting in the game feel like a breeze. So after all of this, it was time for ranked. I am also going to mimic how he plays the game, and TenZ has a pretty outspoken playstyle. He relies on his aim a lot, so he loves taking the duelist role and being aggressive. He is very confident in his movement and takes a lot of engagements. It basically always feels like he's going for the clip. He also tries to make as much space as possible by relying on his raw skills in winning duels, but of course he's not just going to neglect the team play. And for me, this ended up working out. My gameplay felt pretty good. I was fragging out on Reyna, taking my duels, and helping take space aggressively.
One enemy remaining. One enemy remaining.
The first game was a solid win. Second game we took all the way to overtime and then sadly had to bite the dust, but overall I could already notice a difference even on this first day, just by starting off with a good and solid routine before jumping in ranked and playing with a lot of confidence. Next up we have Boaster, one of my personal favorite players. He also came from CSGO, where he apparently took part in the longest ever professional match and lost. He's currently the IGL for Fnatic, one of the strongest EU teams with multiple tournament wins. Boaster has a lot of experience, a lot of skill, and most importantly, a very different routine and playstyle from most other pros. When he explains his aiming routine, he does not mention aim labs, but usually prefers to keep it in the game. Because of his background in CSGO, he developed this habit of aim training on a wall, using little marks to flick to and practice consistency. Kind of like a DIY aim labs, but with the movement and recoil of the actual in-game guns. He also has a really cool technique with the bots, where you make sure they're all on one side and the 2 others spawn on the other. This way you just have to focus on flicking between the 2, again like a DIY aimlabs routine, and I actually really enjoyed this one. After that he likes to practice spray transfers, another important technique in the game as well, and finally some hard bots, which apparently every pro likes to do. When watching his VOD, it was clear that he enjoys running both TDMs and normal DMs. His crosshair is usually a simple open cross with outlines, and I have to say that he has a fun, easy routine that warms me up pretty well. His crosshair also felt good to play with. However, his gameplay style, like I mentioned before, is very different. He is really safe, posts up on good angles, sprays a bit more for smokes and wallbang spots, But above all, he plays heavily for info. He jump spots most of the time, checks util, peeks very carefully. He rarely takes a fight without getting the necessary info first. He also plays most roles except duelist. So the games themselves for me ended up not going too well. I'm not a very patient person, and having to take it slower was throwing me off by a lot. I felt like I was just playing with way less confidence, and it also reflected in my aim. Both games ended in a loss. I did make a few nice plays, but I wasn't consistent at all. After some thinking, I realized that in gold it's definitely better for me to just run it down and get the kills, while in higher level play I could definitely see this other playstyle working out way better.
Last player standing.
Curry, a pro player and content creator who started out in, well, you guessed it, CSGO. Currently signed with Sentinels and mostly known for hitting rank 1 Radiant multiple times. Overall, a really good and consistent player. So how does he do it? He has a full aim-labs routine, which funnily enough is an improved version of Demon 1's aim-labs playlist. So yes, we are playing this improved version before playing the actual playlist. But taking on this playlist was so difficult. I had a lot of trouble with most of the exercises. This definitely felt like it was designed for experienced players that are already insane aimers and not really for plebs like me. A lot of tracking again, flicks on tiny moving targets, but there were some things I did enjoy more. Now moving into the game, he likes to run some team deathmatches, focusing on tapping and bursting, no spraying. The crosshair he has recently been using is the standard white cross. Now, even though I had trouble with the aim labs, my team deathmatches were really good. I felt very dialed in and clean. Maybe exhausting my hand and brain with like all that hard shit makes the actual in-game scenarios feel a lot easier? I'm not entirely sure. His gameplay style is very analytical. He thinks a lot about every move that he makes, constantly checking the minimap and studying his opponents. But he also is not afraid to take duels and make ambitious plays. He's confident in his peaks, but never just blind pushing. Kinda like a hybrid of TenZ and Boaster. Curry also plays a lot of agents, so he is mostly flex and communicates a lot with his team. For the ranked games themselves, they felt insanely good. I had to warm up a bit on Sova first, but after some rounds I was clicking heads again.
One enemy remaining.
Concentrate, Sova.
Game 1 was a close win. Game 2 I went to deadlock, and I have to say that his specific playstyle feels so good to me on an agent like this. Both playing a bit safer with angles and gathering info, but taking duels when I had a good opportunity, it felt really good. This game also ended in a win, so I got back the elo that I lost yesterday. Now onto Nets. I don't think I should mention it again, but he's another CSGO pro that moved to Valorant. Currently playing for Team Liquid and had a very impressive record when he was a part of Gambit before. His routine is probably the simplest of them all. First he does a lot of the eliminate 100 bots, and then of course some hard bots like everyone else does. But I also noticed that he uses the Phantom way more than other players, which is something I'd have to get used to. His crosshair is similar to Boaster's, but green and slightly smaller. After the range he runs a lot of death matches, but Jesus Christ do I hate the Phantom. I kept hitting people for 140 and then dying over and over and over again. I am a tapper. I play Vandal, Guardian and Sheriff. This was really tough at first, but eventually over time I got better at it. I noticed that with the Phantom you can start bursting a bit faster after a quick flick and then finish them off with a second burst, which is super satisfying. So yes, I do have to admit that eventually it felt really good to burst people like that. Now it's time for some games. From the VOD review I could tell that he plays mostly flex, confident and is very fast in his decision making, quickly changing up angles, rotating or pushing something. He loves being a playmaker as well, but in tournaments he's more known as a red player, which is a pretty funny contrast. Anyway, the gameplay for me was alright. Nothing too crazy, some nice shots, but I wasn't feeling too crisp. I did some red plays as well, and got a few clutches where it matters. One game we got stomped, the other we stomped, by getting closer and closer to that platinum rank. At least I've been consistent and never really dragged the team down. And quickly, most people that watch my content are not subscribed, so consider clicking that button if you do enjoy watching videos like this, and leave a like, you know, it helps me out and it's free. Thank you.
All mid. copy.
One enemy remaining.
Let me kill this. Never mind. Next up, Subroza, who played for Team Liquid for a while and is also a big content creator, consistently pushing the high ranks. I said that Nat's routine is the simplest of them all, but it might also be Subroza's. He mainly does a bunch of stuff in the range like tapping some bots, some spray control just like Boaster, and then with the Neon ult while moving to work on his tracking. I actually really like this exercise, much more than the tracking stuff in aim labs. Of course he also does the hard bots, but usually with jet knives. Now what makes this routine special is that he heavily advocates for ranked games, saying the best way to practice and learn is by just playing more ranked. So instead of doing stuff like deathmatches, I just did twice the amount of games today. Oh, and his crosshair is just a dot, a bit bigger than what TenZ has. His gameplay style is on the safer side, he quickly repositions, goes off info, but isn't afraid of taking duels and going for a clip, mainly playing duelist and initiators. So let's talk about the games. First off, some Sova. I didn't feel particularly clean or sharp, but still had some nice glitches and ended up top fragging.
Hold them blind.
B.
One enemy remaining. Spike down.
Yeah, we can rotate.
I suggest you move.
One enemy remaining.
Nice, well played.
Thank you. I am so close to the rank up now. Dude, I'm 3 points off. I got 27. Next game on Phoenix was kinda miserable. It took me like 5 rounds to get a kill, and even though we were ahead for most of the game and I started shooting back a bit, we still ended up taking the loss. Next one I locked Reyna to redeem myself, and I still wasn't the cleanest, but at least I carried my weight a bit more and finally returned back to platinum. Last game was another Sova. I finally warmed up a bit, but we had some truly miserable teammates and I am back at 0. Overall, I feel like I need a bit better of a warm up and aim routine than just gameplay for me to get dialed in and like feel sharp.
Planted. Win.
It is time for Forsaken's routine. Another former CSGO pro who is now part of Paper Rex. Again, a really impressive team with many great achievements. He's also known as a player with incredibly good aim. Forsaken mainly practices in the range, shooting a bunch of bots while working on his flicks, then some hard bots with both the Vandal, a Sheriff, a Ghost, and the Phantom. Then there's a bunch of other random things that he does in the range, like shooting random targets, going very long range, shooting from many different angles, and so on. Basically, again, mimicking aim labs exercises. But for his crosshair, it is this open black cross, and I am having a very hard time with it, especially from long range. After the bots, he jumps in some deathmatches. They went alright for me, but so far this is definitely the crosshair that messes me up the most. For the gameplay, he's a duelist and constantly takes aggressive angles, but most importantly, he seems very aware of where all opponents are or could be at any given moment, like even while he's pushing onto his side or in a clutch situation. So I locked some duelists as well and tried to make some plays. I definitely threw a couple rounds, maybe a little bit of overconfidence, but I made up for it in the long run and we won both games fairly easily. At this point, I could also feel myself actually improving and hitting some nasty clips. The 6 days of different aim routines and warm-ups are finally paying off.
One enemy remaining. Last player standing. One enemy remaining.
Fuck!
Nice try.
The last day of this challenge, we look at Demon 1. For many people, one of the best players at the moment with ridiculous aim. Named the MVP of Valorant Champions 2023, tied with Zekken for the most kills in a single VCT International Series, and awarded as the Esports Breakthrough Player of 2023. Currently playing for NRG. His routine is more intense, consisting of his own aimlabs playlist, so not the improved one that we played earlier, which feels a lot easier and more pleasant to play, but still quite difficult, starting off with many tracking exercises again, like Almost too many. But then we got into some classic flicking. One of them was just being a simulation of the range pretty much. He also jumps in the range after to shoot some bots, focusing on just tapping, no spraying allowed. And I will also mention that his crosshair has recently been a tiny dot as well. I think slightly bigger than TenZ, but still smaller than Subroza's, so in between, and I like it a lot. He also practices flicks with the sheriff, something that I'm actually decent at. And then he runs some deathmatches. They were really good for me as well. I can definitely notice whenever I warmed up with some aim labs and did some bots in the range. And with that, I felt very motivated and ready to play these final ranked games. Demon 1's playstyle heavily revolves around his aim, because he knows his raw mechanical skill is amazing. He takes on so many duels and just tries to outfrag everyone, even more than what TenZ seems to go for so far. So that was my goal, jumping into fights and being confident in my aim after this week of training. I'm safe.
One enemy remaining.
Nice.
That first game went scarily good, although I don't know how I choked the 6k, but anyway.
One enemy remaining.
Backside.
No! GG's.
GG. Love you guys. Have a nice day.
The other game went a bit worse, but I had my few impact rounds.
One enemy remaining.
She's low, she's low.
One enemy remaining.
Left.
left. Shot.
It ended up being a close loss. I climbed quite a bit this week and felt actual improvement by the end, but what routine, crosshair and playstyle was the best? Obviously it's gonna be hard to tell after trying every routine for just a single day. They're meant to be used for weeks and months on end, but some were definitely more fun than others and actually made the gameplay feel much better afterwards. They got me all fired up. I'll say that I do enjoy starting with some aim labs, not the super hard stuff like Curry's routine with the improved Demon 1 playlist, but more like what TenZ did and some stuff from Demon 1's normal list. I might end up making my own playlist with a mix of everything. Then in the range, I really enjoyed just messing around a bit. The DIY aim labs routine on the bots like what Boaster and Subroza did, and since every pro seems to practice on the hard bots, I guess that will be part of my routine too. After that, I think the DMs are more impactful than just normal DMs. You get a more realistic engagement and can play more for angles, while being careful not to peek into multiple enemies at once. Deathmatches definitely feel like more of a warm-up. For crosshair, I enjoyed the smaller ones. A lot of players seem to use some variation of the dot, which did make me feel more accurate, but I could also see myself playing with a small cross. No way that I'm ever touching Forsaken's crosshair again. Or nets. I'm just not a big fan of colors. Lastly, for the gameplay style, I'm gold plat and I definitely had more impact on duelists, going for frags and making plays. When I was more safe and relying on team play, I often just ended up in a situation where I was the last one standing and had to clutch, or my team just does not listen to callouts or provide me with info. But I assume as I rank up, that will change more. Also, screw the Phantom. It had its moments and maps, but the frustration just was not worth it for me. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.